The Space Between by Kiki Thorpe. Fawn sat alone in the home tree courtyard, twirling the end of her braid between her fingers. Lainey, Mia, Kate, and Gabby had gone to the fairy circle. Any moment now, they'd be on their way back to their real homes. Fawn knew she should see them off, but she couldn't bring herself to go. Fawn hated goodbyes. As a Never Fairy, she really had to say them. Fairies hardly ever left Pixie Hollow, and when they did, it was never for long. As for her animal friends, Fawn could see them whenever she wanted, because the creatures of Neverland never grew old. But now her new clumsy friends were gone, and she hadn't said so much as fly safely. Not even to Lainey, whom Fawn liked especially. Fawn felt tears pricking at the backs of her eyes. "You knew this day would come," she scolded herself. "There's no sense crying over it." At last, Fawn got to her feet, but instead of flying to the fairy circle, she flew in the opposite direction, toward the dairy barn. When Fawn's spirits were low, she liked to visit the dairy mice. She was always happiest around animals. As Fawn pulled open the heavy door, the mice lifted their heads in greeting. "How are you, Thistledown? Feeling well, Cloverseed?" she asked as she walked among them. The mice came forward to snuffle her pockets, the bells around their necks chiming faintly. Fawn scratched them behind their ears. "Where's Milkweed?" she wondered, noticing an empty stall. The mice only blinked in reply. Fawn understood mice well enough to know that not one of them had noticed Milkweed was missing until now. Mice could be self-centered that way. "I reckon he's wandered off," she said, "probably raiding Rosetta's garden for seeds again." Milkweed was a good name for the missing mouse because, like the weed, he was always turning up where he wasn't wanted. "I'll have to go find him." Fawn was glad to have something to do to take her mind off the girls. Leaving the dairy barn, she headed outside, calling for Milkweed in soft squeaks. "Milkweed, where are you, you little furball?" Fawn looked in Rosetta's garden, but she didn't see Milkweed there. She tried other gardens, then circled Pixie Hollow, flying wider and wider loops. When she came to Cavendish Stream, she paused. Beyond was a grand forest of Neverland. Fawn didn't think the little mouse could have crossed the stream on his own. She was about to turn back when her eyes fell on the stream bank. There in the mud, as clear as day, was a mouse's footprint. Fawn sighed. "Oh, bugs and beetles, what are you up to now, Milkweed?" She flew across the stream and came to a stop in front of a massive fig tree. It was so large that it looked like several trees grown together. At the base of the tree was a hollow that she had never noticed before. To Fawn, the hole seemed as big as a cave. Were Fawn's ears playing tricks on her, or did she hear a bell? She listened carefully. Yes, there it was, a faint jingling. It seemed to be coming from inside the fig tree. She peered cautiously into the hollow. Fawn wasn't afraid of most animals. She'd talked her way out of tight spots with snakes, badgers, even an owl. Still, she wasn't foolish enough to walk blindly into a predator's nest. "Hello!" Fawn called into the darkness. Silence greeted her. Taking a deep breath, Fawn flew into the tree. Like all fairies, Fawn glowed, but her glow only allowed her to see a couple of inches in front of her. She flew slowly, shivering as she brushed against cobwebs. Fawn could no longer hear the bell. "Milkweed!" she called. Just then, Fawn saw light ahead. But how could that be? Wasn't the mouth of the hollow behind her? Had she gotten turned around? "Fawn, you doodlehead," she said to herself. "You've been flying in a circle." If Milkweed had ever been inside the hollow tree, he wasn't anymore, Fawn decided. She headed toward the opening. Sunshine flooded her eyes. Fawn stopped, blinking in surprise at the strange landscape before her. A sea of green grass stretched below her feet. But what odd grass! Every blade had been snipped off at the exact same height. Fawn flew down close to examine the grass, trying to imagine what creature could have cut it just so. Why, she thought, even the most talented harvest fairies couldn't have been so precise. And the flowers! Fawn stared in amazement. They grew in tidy rows, lined up as neatly as marching ants. Flowers in Pixie Hollow grew hither and thither wherever the wind, or the garden fairies, planted them. "What is this place?" Fawn murmured. Then Fawn saw something that made her catch her breath. Ahead, a massive structure rose up from the grass, so high it seemed to touch the sky. Fawn could tell from the doors and windows that the thing was a house. But who would live in such a house? It was bigger than the entire home tree, big enough to hold a whole family of clumsies. With a start, Fawn realized that she was looking at a clumsy house. But that's impossible, she said aloud. Clumsies lived on the mainland, a place far, far from Pixie Hollow. So what was a clumsy house doing inside an old fig tree? Fawn knew she should fly straight back to the home tree and tell the queen what she'd found. But her curiosity got the better of her. Instead of going back, Fawn flew forward. Right away, Fawn could tell she was no longer in Pixie Hollow. The air felt different. It smelled different. She could hear birds singing, but she didn't recognize their songs. Fawn heard other noises too, strange rumbling sounds that came and went like ocean waves. For the life of her, she couldn't have said what made them. Fawn flew slowly through the flowers, enjoying the sense of adventure. What kinds of animals live here? She wondered. In Fawn's opinion, you couldn't know much about a place until you met its animals. The house loomed in front of her. Flying up to a window, Fawn peeked inside. She saw what looked like a sitting room. There were chairs, lamps, and a table. Books and shoes were scattered everywhere, but she didn't see any clumsies. Somewhere nearby, a bell jingled faintly. "Milkweed?" Fawn called. She looked behind her, but the mouse didn't show a whisker. There's something funny about that jingle, Fawn thought with a frown. Whatever was wearing the bell didn't move like a mouse. Fawn spun around just in time to see something lunge toward her. She screamed. As she leaped from the windowsill, she caught a glimpse of yellow eyes and needle-sharp teeth. Fawn zigzagged back the way she'd come, searching for the hollow fig tree. But each way she turned, she saw only a tall wooden fence. "Where is it?" she wailed, launching this way and that. "Where is it?" With a cold jolt of fear, Fawn realized that the tree wasn't there. The passage to Pixie Hollow was gone. Fawn glanced back over her shoulder. She saw now that her pursuer was a cat. His brown fur was striped like a tiger's, and his eyes were like bits of amber. They narrowed as he stalked toward Fawn, his tail twitching eagerly. Fawn gave up looking for the fig tree and searched for any escape. Along one side of the fence, she noticed a narrow gap between the wooden slats. It would be a tight squeeze, but it was her only chance. Fawn raced towards the gap in the fence. She reached it just as the cat leaped. Fawn wriggled and twisted, trying to squeeze her wings through. She felt one of the boards move slightly, as though it was loose, and at last she shot through the gap. Behind her, the cat slammed against the fence with an angry yowl. Fawn looked up and gasped. She was back in Pixie Hollow. What? How? Fawn stuttered. She spun around. She was hovering in front of a hollow fig tree. Fawn's wings felt like they were going to give out. She sank to the ground, trembling all over. It doesn't matter how I got here, she thought. The important thing is that I'm still alive. Fawn glanced back at the hollow tree and shivered. That tree was dangerous. She knew she had better tell Queen Clarion about it right away. As Fawn got up to leave, she heard a faint jingle. She looked back at the hollow. 2 yellow eyes peered at her from the darkness. "Oh no!" Fawn cried as a blur of brown fur streaked toward her. She had led the cat right into Pixie Hollow.